It was a quiet Sunday morning in Lagos. A letter arrived, neatly sealed, delivered with a smile. Minutes later, an explosion tore through the walls of his home, and with it, the heart of Nigerian journalism. The man behind Newswatch, fearless, outspoken, untouchable, was gone. But who wanted Dele Giwa dead, and why? This is the story of the journalist Nigeria couldn't silence. Before the explosion that shook a nation, there was a young man who believed words could rebuild it. His name was Dele Giwa, born in 1947 in Ile-Ife, Osun State, to a modest family with big dreams. Like many children of his generation, he grew up in a country tasting freedom after colonial rule, a nation learning how to find its own voice. From the dusty classrooms of primary school to the bustling streets of Lagos, Dele carried one thing with him, which was curiosity. He wanted to know why things were the way they were, and more importantly, why no one dared to question them. After his studies, Dele found his calling in journalism. He began at Daily Times, where his sharp writing and bold opinions quickly made him stand out. He later studied in the United States, learning not just how to write, but how to speak truth to power. When he returned home, he came back with a vision which was to reshape Nigerian journalism. In 1984, along with Ray Ekpu, Dan Agbese, and Yakubu Mohammed, he co-founded Newswatch Magazine, which was Nigeria's first truly independent news magazine. It wasn't just another publication, it was a revolution in print. Newswatch dared to ask questions no one else would. It investigated corruption, exposed scandals, and held the powerful accountable. To Dele Giwa, journalism wasn't just a career, it was a weapon for justice. He believed the pen could change Nigeria, and for a while, it did. Newswatch became the voice of a restless people. But in a country where truth often threatened those in power, that voice soon became a target. By the mid-1980s, Newswatch was no longer just a magazine, it was a movement. Every Monday morning, Nigerians rushed to newsstands to see what Dele Giwa and his team would uncover next. They told stories no one else dared to tell. Stories about corruption, greed, and abuse of power in a military-ruled nation. While others praised the government to stay safe, Newswatch questioned it fearlessly. They wrote about soldiers living like kings, while ordinary Nigerians struggled to survive. They investigated missing funds, shady deals, and secret detentions. And at the center of it all was Dele Giwa, the editor with a sharp pen and a sharper mind. His interviews were bold, his words unfiltered. To his readers, he was a hero, the man who spoke truth to power. But to some in government, he had become a problem that needed to be contained. The Babangida administration, which had come to power through a military coup, was not used to being questioned. Each new Newswatch story felt like a public challenge. Articles about smuggling, power abuse, and internal conflicts inside the regime stirred quiet anger in high places. Friends began to warn him, "Dele, you're going too far," but he would smile and say, "Truth has no fear." He believed that if journalism meant anything, it meant courage. Yet courage in those days came with a price. Behind the scenes, his name began appearing in intelligence reports. Security agents watched, whispered, and waited. Dele Giwa was becoming too powerful, too loud, and in a regime built on silence that made him dangerous. He had built his voice on truth, But in Nigeria of the 1980s, truth could get you killed. By October 1986, Dele Giwa could sense something was wrong. The air around him had changed. The phone calls, the whispers, and the shadows that seemed to follow his every move. In the weeks before his death, he had been invited for questioning by the State Security Service, the SSS. The interrogation was tense. They accused him of plotting against the government and working with enemies of the state. Throwing wild claims meant to shake his confidence. But Dele walked out of that room more convinced than ever that truth had become his crime. He told friends he felt watched. Cars parked outside his home, faces he didn't recognize, phone calls that came and went without a word. At Newswatch, his colleagues noticed the change. He smiled less, laughed less. Still, he kept writing. He believed silence was more dangerous than fear. On October 18th, the day before the tragedy, he spoke to his close friend and fellow editor, Ray Ekpu. He said he felt something was coming, but couldn't explain what. No one could imagine how soon it would arrive or what form it would take. He had faced military power before, but this was different. It wasn't an argument or a headline. It was silence. A silence that felt like a warning. Dele Giwa was right. Something was coming, but no one imagined it would come in an envelope. On Sunday, October 19th, 1986. It was an ordinary morning, the kind that begins with peace, not suspicion. Inside his home at 25 Talabi Street, Ikeja, Dele Giwa sat with his family. His mother had come to visit. A quiet, loving presence in a house that had known too much noise. He was relaxed. The tension of the past week seemed far away. There was talk, there was tea, then a knock on the door. A courier stood outside with a brown envelope, neatly wrapped, marked as confidential. His son collected it and brought it to him. It looked official and harmless, the kind of letter journalists received every day. Dele smiled faintly as he opened it, unaware that inside that envelope lay death itself. In an instant, the calm turned to chaos. The sound shattered the morning air. Windows broke, walls shook, and neighbors screamed. His mother, the woman who had raised him, who had watched him rise, was thrown backward by the blast. Dele Giwa lay motionless, his body torn, his dream silenced. Within seconds, silence fell, and a nation woke up to fear. Word spread fast. The editor of Newswatch had been killed by a parcel bomb. It was the first of its kind in Nigeria. Journalists gathered outside hospitals, crying, refusing to believe it. The newsroom that once buzzed with hope fell quiet, as if the very spirit of the press had been blown away. In that moment, every reporter, every writer, every truth-teller in Nigeria understood something. Telling the truth had just become a deadly act. The morning after the explosion, Nigeria woke up to confusion, fear, and disbelief. Dele Giwa, one of the most outspoken journalists in the country, had been murdered in his own home. But who would send a bomb through the mail and why? The government of General Ibrahim Babangida quickly condemned the killing, calling it a national tragedy. Security agencies promised an investigation, but even from the start, the public had doubts. Just days before his death, Dele Giwa had been questioned by the State Security Service, the SSS, and the Directorate of Military Intelligence. Many Nigerians began to wonder, how could the same agencies that had interrogated him now lead the investigation into his death? The trail of evidence was thin, But the suspicion was thick. Witnesses spoke of mysterious visitors. Some claimed the package came from official sources. Others said the courier had been seen near military vehicles. Babangida's administration denied all involvement. His spokesman called the accusations ridiculous, insisting that government had no reason to harm a journalist. But the questions wouldn't go away. As the weeks passed, the investigation grew cold. Reports were written, committees were formed, but no arrests, no trials, no justice. The more people asked, the quieter the answers became. For Nigeria's journalists, the message was clear. If Dele Giwa could be silenced, anyone could. Fear spread through newsrooms. Articles were edited more carefully, and headlines softened. The bomb had done more than kill a man, it had wounded free speech. Decades later, the case remains unsolved. No one has been convicted. The truth sits buried beneath layers of silence, secrets, and denial. But to those who still remember, the question remains: who killed Dele Giwa and why? They killed the man, but not the truth he stood for. Those words would echo through the years, becoming a promise that Dele Giwa's voice would never truly be silenced. After his death, Nigerian journalism was never the same again. The fear was real, but so was the fire he had lit. Reporters began to see their work not just as a job, but as a duty to a nation still searching for truth. Newswatch continued to publish, carrying his spirit in every story, every headline, and every fight for accountability. Even those who never met him grew up hearing his name, learning what it meant to be bold in the face of power. Colleagues called him fearless, brilliant, stubborn, and always guided by purpose. To them, Dele Giwa wasn't just a journalist. He was a symbol of what journalism could be when courage meets conviction. Every year, journalists gather to remember him. Speeches are made, tributes read, and that haunting question still whispered: who killed Dele Giwa? But even without the answer, his legacy lives in every reporter who dares to write the truth, no matter the risk. He was silenced by fear, but remembered through courage. His death exposed the darkness, but his life showed the light. In the end, Dele Giwa's story reminds us that the truth can be delayed, but never destroyed. Dele Giwa's voice still echoes across decades, across headlines, and across generations. His story reminds us that truth is dangerous, but silence is deadlier. He faced power with words. He stood for truth when lies were safer. And though they tried to silence him, they only made his story louder. If you believe stories like this should never be forgotten, and if you believe history should speak louder than fear, then help keep it alive by liking, sharing, and subscribing. Not just for Dele Giwa's story, but for every voice that still fights to be heard. Thank you.